Before we begin, I feel like I need to preface the fact that I am a fan of the comic book and superhero genre. I've loved superheroes all my life. I've collected comic books since I was, like 12? I used to collect the Astonishing Spider-Man little collections that came in the grocery stores in the UK. I have a whole pile of, unread comic books over there. The bottom part of that shelf is filled with all my Spider-Man and Daredevil and Batman stuff. And then just behind the Jon Snow cosplay thing, there's a bucket. And inside that bucket is all filled with old Spider-Man comics. Not to mention all the other comics I've read online and stuff. I'm a fan of the comic book genre. So everything I say in this video is out of love. I'm not doing it because, I'm a snooty, snobby film fan that's like, the MCU and Marvel and comic book films, blah, that's kid stuff, that's disgusting. No, I'm a fan of the genre. I love this stuff, and the thing is that everything I'm saying right now comes from a place of love, but also from a sense of disappointment. I loved this genre, and in many ways the comic book genre felt like real films from the early 2000s to the mid to late 2010s. But lately, their quality has just fallen drastically in my eyes. All the comic book films feel the same. The MCU films, they all feel the same. Yes, they may have tiny little changes because of different characters or it's a team film or whatever, but overall, when it comes to the overall story structure and structure of the action sequences and the overall looks of these films, they all feel the same. Heck, even the DCEU feels like the MCU. There isn't really much of a difference between a Shazam 2 or a Captain Marvel or an Avengers or a Suicide Squad. They all feel the same. It also doesn't help that recently all of these films are bad. The thing that I also find kind of weird and kind of funny too is how DC fans absolutely despise Justice League. Yet The Flash in many sequences feels like Justice League, but then certain sections of the DC fanbase love The Flash and I don't understand that at all. Maybe they do, maybe they don't, I don't know. Comic book fans change their mind about things every 10 seconds on Twitter. They are the most inconsistent fan base. In addition to the fact that the DC and Marvel films also feel the same, a lot of the more recent superhero films feel incredibly derivative. You look at Black Adam, and in many sequences, it feels like we're going through all the cliches. Like, really? Did we have to stop the film to have Black Adam do a super slow-mo sequence where Black Adam is moving at super speed, but everything is in slow motion, and we're playing a very popular pop song in the background as Black Adam is moving stuff around, similar to Quicksilver in Days of Future Past and Apocalypse? Another issue I have with the genre at the minute is the whole interconnected shared cinematic universe. The MCU was known as the king of the cinematic universes, yet recently the MCU has somehow lost all of its interconnectivity. You look at things like the concept of the multiverse and how it varies from project to project. The idea and concept of the multiverse in Loki is different to the idea and concept of the multiverse in Doctor Strange 2. In Loki, it was the fairly standard trope of, there's infinite universes and you can travel to different ones and there are slight little differences in every universe. But in Doctor Strange 2, apparently a universe is created through dreams, and it's like, what? The crazy thing too is that both of these projects are written by the same writer. How? Also, when it comes to the MCU, is no one going to address the fact that there is just a celestial head and hand poking out of the earth? How has that not appeared in the background on some kind of news report or in some kind of newspaper? How? Marvel used to be really good at this. Another issue I have with the comic book and superhero genre is that I am so tired of the sloppy, self-referential, sitcom-esque humor that plagues these films.
You wanna show me how to punch? Show me how to punch.
That's how you punch.
I'm sorry, what was your name again?
Dr. Otto Octavius.
Wait, no, seriously, what's your actual name?
It's like Batman stuff.
Batman's a fascist.
I'm sorry. I don't know what came over me. Please let me fix it so I can play it again.
It's all about
Family! Family! Guys, that was a signal.
Did he just catch a rocket?
He got a rocket.
You're strapped to your parachutes. Where's yours?
I don't need a joke every 10 seconds to enjoy a film. And the thing is too, I realized this, I think it was after Ant-Man and the Wasp, when I saw that film and I realized, the reason why these films are plagued with this type of humor is so that when audiences and critics leave, they can go, I laughed, I had a good time. I don't remember what the hell happened in the film, but all I remember is that I had the feeling of enjoying it. So that when they go online later to either fill in their review or log their audience score onto Rotten Tomatoes, they give it a thumbs up. Because Rotten Tomatoes as a site is a very binary thing. You either give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. It doesn't matter how strong the thumbs up is or how lukewarm the thumbs down or thumbs up is. It doesn't matter. It's very binary. Did you like it or did you not like it? I noticed this a lot when it came to things like Zack Snyder's Justice League, because a reviewer who reviewed Justice League 2017, they gave it a thumbs up. They gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. And with Zack Snyder's Justice League, they gave it a thumbs down, but they also gave it 3 out of 5 stars. So, how does that work? Also, another thing too, can we stop pretending like the source material is lame and uncool? We've moved past the days now where you can make fun of, I don't know, Jarvis, or you can make fun of MODOK. Audiences just want to see these characters brought to screen now, so stop making fun of, say, the X-Men suits. We've moved past that. Just bring the comic book stuff we love from the comic books to the screen. Another issue I have with the genre, and granted this does apply mainly to the MCU, but it does also apply to the DCU, and it's mainly the fact that the MCU currently is focusing on all these D and C and E-list characters, and they keep acting like they're massive big deals, expecting audiences to care. But the problem is that audiences don't care. Nobody asked for the Eternals, nobody was clamoring for a show based on Echo, and no one gave a damn about Ironheart, specifically after Wakanda Forever. Wakanda Forever spent a bunch of its runtime setting up the Ironheart character and her own show, but by the time that film came out and audiences saw it, I didn't hear anybody clamoring for an Ironheart show. It's come to the point now where it feels like Marvel is just relying on all these lower tier characters because they've cancelled all their flagship tier characters because either the actors don't want to do it anymore or they're demanding more money, and so now it's come to the point where they're relying on all these low tier characters, but audiences don't care about them. In many ways, it feels like DC Comics in the 90s where the Justice League was formed out of a bunch of low tier characters that no one cared about. And so to re-engage the DC fans, DC killed off Superman, and it seems like the MCU is doing something similar by bringing in Secret Wars and expecting everyone to be enamored by all the cameos from all the different Marvel franchises throughout the decades. But the thing is with all these low tier characters is, again, they keep acting like they're big deals. Why did Ant-Man get 3 films? The only good Ant-Man film is the first one, and that's mainly because 1, it was visually interesting, 2, the script was somewhat solid, and 3, a lot of the new and inventive ideas was all created by Edgar Wright before he left the project. Edgar Wright is also still credited as a screenwriter for the first Ant-Man, and so a lot of the witty and fun jokes from that film I can probably attribute to Edgar Wright, because when you get to Ant-Man and the Wasp and Peyton Reed is left to his own devices, that film is dull and generic as hell. Also, I just didn't even bother watching Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. I didn't care. I saw a bunch of leaked footage from that film on Twitter and I was like, yeah, I'm good. This looks awful. I'm not wasting my time to watch this film.
I don't know, just don't be a dick.
My name is Darren. I am not a dick.
Now, the thing is, recently, the MCU is mainly relying on all these low-tier characters. But the issue is that some of the characters that I really do care about in the MCU are still active, namely Spider-Man and Daredevil. And the things that scares me the most is what are they going to do to these characters moving forwards. Tom Holland's Spider-Man 4 has the potential to be good because the ending to No Way Home gave them a clean slate. He's now just a lone Spider-Man doing his Spider-Man thing. He doesn't have a social circle, and so it could be interesting and compelling. We could see Spider-Man feel like Spider-Man. But the thing that scares me is, are they going to waste the potential of that story of having Peter Parker be a loner and just undo the ending to No Way Home? The spell is broken, MJ and Ned remember, and all of a sudden Peter has his girlfriend and best friend back. Now, when the eventual trailer for Spider-Man 4 comes out and they reveal that, it could potentially work in the film. It's just that the problem is that half the time they reveal something as big as that in the trailer, most of the time it doesn't always work. Now, there are exceptions to that rule. I mean, Spider-Man No Way Home is the perfect example. Going into Spider-Man No Way Home, I thought the film was going to be terrible, mainly because I didn't like Spider-Man Far From Home. But after seeing the trailers, I was more excited. I saw the film, and I loved it. Granted, No Way Home has its issues and problems, mainly with VFX and inconsistencies in the writing and continuity and all that stuff. But overall, as a film, it's fun, it's enjoyable, I liked it a lot. The thing is with Spider-Man 4 is that even if it does win me over with them undoing the spell at the end of No Way Home straight away, I won't lie, it will bug me mainly for the fact that it's wasted story potential. You can't give us such a gut-wrenching ending of Peter being alone and then just giving him everything back in Spider-Man 4. Because ultimately it's going to lower the stakes of the story. Why should we care if everything that's serious and important happens gets undone? Like what, we're gonna bring Aunt May back from the dead now? Like, you can't do that. You can't keep pulling the rug from under audiences going, hey, here's something compelling, and then just taking it away from them. Another project that I'm very much looking forward to is Deadpool 3. I like the previous 2 Deadpool films, and Deadpool 3 is obviously bringing back Hugh Jackman, which I'm incredibly excited for. The set pictures we got of Hugh Jackman in the Wolverine costume before production was shut down because of the SAG and WGA strikes was incredible. Hugh Jackman is probably one of, if not the perfect comic book casting. His Wolverine is exceptional, and seeing him in the comic book accurate costume, I am over the moon. I'm so excited. And apparently that film is supposed to be a send-off to the Fox universe of Marvel films, which could be really nice and really fun, so long as they do it right. Because ultimately, whether or not you're a fan of the Fox X-Men films, I personally am. I actually quite enjoyed that series a lot. You can't just act like those films are awful and terrible and give them the middle finger and then just go, yeah, hey, look, we're bringing Deadpool into the MCU now, enjoy what we're making instead of that old stuff. I don't think that's what that film is going to do, seeing as how Kevin Feige did work on the old X-Men film, so here's hoping they actually, pay respect to that stuff. But also, I'm pretty sure that they have to pay respect to that stuff because they don't want to alienate all the audiences that grew up with those films. In many ways, it was kind of a blessing that Deadpool 3 shut down production because of the SAG and WGA strikes, because ultimately, when they were filming, Ryan Reynolds couldn't alter the script, he couldn't improv on set, and that's kind of the magic and fun of the Deadpool film, so the fact that he now, when they resume production, can improv on set, that's going to be a blessing in the long run. Does it suck that it's not going to make its May of 2024 release date? Yes. But at the end of the day, all I want ultimately is a good film, regardless of how early or late it comes. Now, another project that I am anticipating is Daredevil Born Again, because Charlie Cox's Daredevil is up there with Hugh Jackman as Wolverine for me. He is, if not, is one of the best comic book castings ever. His Matt Murdock is perfection. The Netflix Daredevil was perfection. Granted, season 2 wobbles a little bit with all the stuff with the hand, but I still find that stuff entertaining. Regardless of that, Daredevil season 1, 2, and 3, that Netflix show is one of, if not the best comic book adaptations ever. That show is a masterpiece. And the thing is, because I hold that show in such high regard, the people at Marvel Studios need to know that fans hold that show in such high regard, because again, it is a masterpiece. And granted, they have massive shoes to fill, because I'm not gonna lie, I won't accept anything that is less than great from this show. I liked the way Charlie Cox's Daredevil was handled in She-Hulk. In many ways, he's the best part of that show, and his portrayal was perfect. In many ways, it felt like he himself had not skipped a beat. He was fun and engaging to watch, his performance was always stellar, but also, he felt like the character from the Netflix show. He was just in a She-Hulk show. And when it comes to Daredevil Born Again, I don't need it to be super bloody or super violent, because when you look at Daredevil throughout the history of the comic books, there are ways to make it stylized so that it doesn't have to be super bloody and gory, but also Daredevil originated as a goofy 60s character that Stan Lee created. He was fun, big and bombastic like early Spider-Man used to be. If you give us something akin to Sam Raimi's take of Spider-Man, but for Daredevil, that's fine. But ultimately, when it comes to Daredevil Born Again, is the fact that the Netflix show is a diamond ring. And you take that diamond ring away from me, and you want to give me another ring, I'm not expecting anything less than a diamond ring. That is the biggest problem Daredevil Born Again has to face, because, again, audiences have seen a stellar and masterful Daredevil show. You can't give them anything less. Also, when it comes to Marvel Studios, I won't lie and say that I am morbidly curious as to how they're going to handle the X-Men and the Fantastic Four, and specifically how they're going to introduce these two teams into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because at this point in time, the Marvel Cinematic Universe has moved on so much that they don't need the X-Men and the Fantastic Four in their franchise. And so it's just going to be weird to just suddenly just plop in the mutants and plop in the Fantastic Four. I'm guessing Secret Wars is going to do some kind of weird soft reboot thing to make it all make sense and fit together, but at the end of the day, it's just going to be a little bit weird. Because the MCU has built the foundations without the X-Men and without the Fantastic Four, it's going to feel even more jarring than, say, when the MCU didn't have Spider-Man. Because when the MCU didn't have Spider-Man, they made it work, and they managed to fit in Spider-Man in a decent way, I guess. The more you question MCU Spider-Man, the less sense it makes, but overall, the way they slipped him into the MCU made sense. I don't know if MCU Peter Parker does have an Uncle Ben, because aside from the briefcase, he doesn't mention his uncle at all, like, ever. Even when Aunt May dies, she's not buried next to Uncle Ben, so it's just a bit weird. Like, in No Way Home, when Toby and Andrew show up and they're all just like, yeah, Uncle Ben said with great power comes great responsibility, Tom Holland just has this look on his face of just like, oh yeah, Uncle Ben. So in many ways, it kind of raises the question as to whether MCU Uncle Ben is either dead or he's just a massive arsehole and Peter tries to forget about him. But anyways, I digress. The Fantastic Four. That's what I want to talk about now. Because I'm not gonna lie, hearing the news about the MCU Fantastic Four, it has me a little bit worried. For years and years, I've seen nerds on the internet proclaim, wait till Marvel Studios has the Fantastic Four and the X-Men. They're going to make the most definitive version of these characters. And I'm not going to lie, considering the casting rumors regarding the Fantastic Four, I don't know if the MCU is going to have the definitive version of the Fantastic Four. Because to be honest, I'm a fan of that 2005 film with Ewan Gruffudd and Jessica Alba, Michael Chiklis and Chris Evans. I like that first film a lot. I think it's really good fun. It's not the best film ever made, but it really captures the dynamic and the core of the Fantastic Four. But when you look at the casting rumors for the Fantastic Four in the MCU, I won't lie, a couple of them have me pretty worried. Now, the rumor that Vanessa Kirby is a surefire lock to play Sue Storm, I think is fine. Though, to be fair, the only issue I have is the fact that Vanessa Kirby looks better with curly and wavy hair, but the character of Sue Storm I always imagine to have very straight hair, and also her hairstyle to me in the comics always feels very 1960s-esque. Maybe it could work for Vanessa Kirby, I'm just not entirely sure. Again, it's the makeup artist and the hairstylist jobs to make her look great on screen. Another one of the rumored castings for the Fantastic Four is Eben Moss-Baccarin as Ben Grimm. I think that's great. You'll know him as Richie from The Bear, but also he played Micro in the Punisher series, which is kind of awkward seeing as how the MCU is considering Netflix Daredevil and Netflix Punisher to be somewhat canon, but then they're also recasting certain characters. So if Punisher ever needs Micro again, is it going to be Eben Moss-Baccarin, or are they going to recast Micro? But even still, if you've seen The Bear, you know that Eben Moss-Baccarin, his character he plays in The Bear, Richie, is kind of like Ben Grimm, and so in many ways he is perfect casting to play the Thing. But the two rumored castings that have me the most concerned are the ones surrounding Johnny Storm and Reed Richards. For Reed Richards, the rumored castings are Adam Driver and Matt Smith, and I'm not gonna lie, although I love both of those actors, I do not see it. In the comics, Reed Richards to me has a very classic 1900s Hollywood aesthetic to him, a very classic Hollywood look to him, and so in many ways Reed Richards does have to be somewhat conventionally attractive. And whilst I think both Adam Driver and Matt Smith are phenomenal actors, they aren't conventionally attractive. Again, they're phenomenal actors and I can for sure seeing them both excel in the role, but they don't scream Reed Richards when I look at them. I think that's kind of the double-edged sword when it comes to casting in Hollywood and in filmmaking in general, because on the one hand, you need acting talent, but on the other hand, you also need to be somewhat superficial and think of the aesthetics. This also does stem into something Bryan Cranston said about lazy casting, in the sense of that, oh, just because you've seen an actor do this before doesn't mean that, you know, you'll cast him in a similar role. For example, Bryan Cranston was famous for playing Walter White and had a shaved head, and everyone's like, oh, he'd be the best Lex Luthor. And he would be, but also he'd be a great Jim Gordon because when he has hair, he looks like Jim Gordon, and yeah, it's kind of lazy casting. And both Adam Driver and Matt Smith have played morally ambiguous characters in Doctor Who and Daemon Targaryen, but also Adam Driver in his various numerous roles like Kylo Ren. And whilst they would definitely be very good in the role of Reed Richards, they don't fit it, if that makes sense. It's not very inspiring. It's funny because my fan cast for Reed Richards many years ago was Josh Radnor. I don't know if he'd still be able to do it now, but when I was watching How I Met Your Mother, I don't know why, but Ted Mosby, the character, but also Josh Radnor, just gave me Reed Richards vibes. But then also, let's talk about the rumored casting for Johnny Storm. The rumored casting so far is of Joseph Quinn, who you will know as Eddie Munson from Stranger Things, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm not a massive fan of that because they got the wrong Stranger Things guy. If you were to cast a Stranger Things actor as Johnny Storm, it'd either be A, Joe Keery, who plays Steve Harrington, because he just brings in that Johnny Storm vibe, but also Dacre Montgomery, who played Billy. Both of them exude way more Johnny Storm vibes than Joseph Quinn. Because when you boil it down, aesthetically, Johnny Storm is a clean-cut American guy that is also a jock and a handsome stud. Chris Evans in the 2005 film was the perfect casting choice. And now, when I think of actors who should play Johnny Storm, I don't think of Joseph Quinn because in many ways, Joseph Quinn doesn't look American. He has a very round, buttony nose similar to Barry Keoghan. And that feature is something you tend to find more on British and Irish people. You don't really see it on many Americans. When I think of actors in Hollywood that should portray Johnny Storm, I don't think of Joseph Quinn. I think of someone like Glenn Powell or Dacre Montgomery. Heck, Austin Butler. In many ways, Austin Butler is kind of like perfect casting to play Johnny Storm. He probably won't do it, seeing as how he's going after roles that he really wants and desires. You know, the more actors in filmic type roles. But at the end of the day, Austin Butler would be like the perfect casting choice to play Johnny Storm. He'd also be a perfect casting choice to play Oliver Queen. But Joseph Quinn? I don't see it. Like, he's a good actor and everyone loves Eddie Munson, but Johnny Storm? Huh? It's these weird rumored casting decisions that have me a little bit confused because if this is supposed to be the definitive version of the Fantastic Four, a lot of the people they're casting don't really seem to fit or look like the characters from the comics. Again, I love Adam Driver, but he does not scream Reed Richards, especially if you try and give him like the short hair and the grey temples and the quip. It doesn't fit. It doesn't seem right. Another reason why the MCU is declining in my eyes is quality control. Producer and head of Marvel Studios, and I think he's also the CEO of Marvel. Or he's the CCO, he's the Chief Creative Officer of Marvel. For many years, Kevin Feige has been hailed as the king of the nerds, as one of the best producers in Hollywood, because yeah, what he did with the MCU was nothing short of astounding and phenomenal. In many ways, kind of like lightning in a bottle. But also because Disney has corporatized Marvel and treated it more like a factory production line, they're just pumping out content and not really assessing quality control. And because Kevin Feige is stretched so thin, he can't assess the quality control of the product. But I also don't think that's entirely the problem. I think also Kevin Feige's sensibilities have changed a bit. The way Kevin Feige talks about the MCU and comic book movies as a whole, he acts like the genre isn't getting stale. He acts like it could go on for another 10, 20 years. But if the films are anything like they are now, it won't, because audience will get tired and bored of them because they all just feel the same. The comics have gone on for so long because every so often they switch writers and they change direction and they feel different. They bring in different artists, and overall when you read a Spider-Man comic from the 70s, it's different to the Spider-Man comics from nowadays, but it's also different to the Spider-Man comics from the early 60s and 90s. They all look and feel different. The MCU doesn't, and that's something I feel needs to change. But also, ever since Kevin Feige has become the chief creative officer of Marvel, it feels like he's trying to homogenize both the comics and the films, which I don't like. You see this all the time in the comic books where the artists try to render the heroes to look more like their MCU counterpart. But also, when you look at Doctor Strange 2, Kevin Feige was really adamant that the MCU was Earth 616, despite the fact that in the comics for several years now, it's been labeled as Earth 1999999 or something like that. And whilst it's funny to see Kevin Feige and Ms. Marvel actor Iman Vellani fight over that, at the end of the day, she's right. By trying to turn the MCU into the definitive 616 version of the Marvel Comics universe, I don't like it because it takes away the distinguished nature of the comics and the movies of the movies. Because if Kevin Feige really wants to portray the MCU as the definitive version of the Marvel comics, then realistically Kevin Feige should be taking more inspiration from the comics. But they don't do that, so I don't know why Kevin Feige is so adamant that the MCU is 616 when it's Earth 1999999. That's the one thing I loved about Across the Spider-Verse, was how they were just like, no, the MCU is Earth 1999999 and 616 is where Peter B. Parker comes from. Can't believe it, but the people at Sony are treating the comics with more respect than the MCU is. Next, you'll tell me that Kevin Feige is going to start doing cameos and replace the Stan Lee cameos of old. Like, that just doesn't feel right and feels a bit weird to me. I mean, he's not going to do that, but that's kind of what it seems like would happen in the future. You see, kids, back in my day, Stan Lee was known as the creator of the Marvel Universe, but now we have Kevin Feige. Kevin Feige is the new Stan Lee. No. That's weird. Now, when it comes to the overall landscape of the superhero and comic book genre, here's one piece of advice I think studios need to take. Not everything has to be a shared cinematic universe. A key example of this is Sony's Spider-Man-less villain universe. Like, what are they thinking? The concept itself is hilariously bad, and the execution has been awful. Look, the first Venom film is a bad film, but also it's decent in the sense of it's so bad that it's entertaining to watch. It's nothing groundbreaking, there's a lot of dumb and silly things in it. In many ways, that film does feel like a Venom comic from the 90s, so I kind of give it a little bit of a pass. Venom Let There Be Carnage is awful. Look, I love Andy Serkis, but that film is bad. It seemed like the writers were kind of tone deaf and didn't realize that the reason why people enjoyed the first Venom film was the fact that, one, Tom Hardy's Venom and Eddie Brock was entertaining to watch, but also a lot of it was just bizarre and weird because of the editing choices and all the weird, goofy mistakes, and so it was bad, but it was like entertainingly bad. But when it came to Venom 2, it just seemed like the writers went, oh, people like Eddie and Venom together, so we're going to give more of that, and we're going to really ham in the joke and bring in the gay metaphor, and it's like, what are you doing? That's not why people like the first film. Like, the Venom and Eddie coming out of the closet metaphor was like kind of funny-ish, but the way it's directed, the way it's written is really tone deaf and really unsubtle, and it's not very funny. Not to mention the fact that they massacred Carnage. What was that? That was horrendous. On paper, Woody Harrelson could have been a phenomenal Carnage, but they butchered it. They ruined it. Carnage in that film is just this big, skinny monster with a very deep voice. That's not Carnage. People love Carnage from the 90s cartoon. That's something I find really baffling too. Avi Arad produces these movies. In many ways, Avi Arad knows what Spider-Man fans like because he made the 90s show, but also people, I feel like, misconstrue Avi Arad. In many ways, Avi Arad does want what's best for Spider-Man fans. Like, he knows what they like in some sort of way. Granted, him meddling with the director's vision and stuff isn't entirely for the best, but for the most part, I kind of like Avi Arad. He's for sure really entertaining to watch at premieres and in the behind-the-scenes stuff. Like, he does care about Spider-Man. But either way, when it comes to Carnage, people remember Carnage from the 90s cartoon, where he's all like, big and hello, man, and he's got like the echoey, high-pitched voice. That's Carnage to people. That's not the Carnage we get in Venom Let There Be Carnage. Also, not to mention the fact that despite it being a meme, Morbius was awful. It was so bland. It was so forgettable. I even forgot I saw Morbius the day I saw it. I left the cinema and literally like 10 minutes later I was like, what did I do today? Oh yeah, I saw Morbius. I forgot that film even existed. I think a key example that supports my point of not everything has to be a shared cinematic universe is things like The Batman, like Joker, and like the Spider-Verse films. Because when you let these creator-driven projects be led by their creators and you leave them to their own devices, they ultimately turn out great and bring in great results. These are the projects that get the Oscar buzz, that get the Oscar awards, that get the creative clout. These are the projects that audiences love and remember. When you give them a generic superhero film like Blue Beetle, they don't care. Also, I just miss the day when these film scripts were good. The times where there weren't contradictions within the script. When character and story was the focus. When the visual effects were impressive. I miss the days when Spider-Man looked like this on screen. But unfortunately, now he just looks like a CGI puppet. Honestly, what is the point of having poor Tom Holland do all these practical stunts and wearing out his knees and wearing this practical costume getting all hot and sweaty if you're just going to paint over it all in post-production? Another thing too that I need superhero and comic book films to stop doing is stop self-deprecating the hero. Like honestly, I'm serious. Stop saying Superman has a poop fetish or that Batman is a fascist or making Wonder Woman sexually assault a man even though it's like unintentional. I don't care. Stop doing it. It makes the heroes look really bad and it makes the audiences lose respect for them. Honestly, it'd be like if in the next Spider-Man film, someone just out of the blue just called Spider-Man a pedophile. Why? What is the point? It's not funny. It's a cheap joke, but at the end of the day, it damages the reputation of these heroes. And now that we're on the topic of DC, let's talk about James Gunn's DCU, his reboot, and whether or not it's going to be successful or not. Because in the short time that James Gunn has been co-CEO of the DCU, you can't really blame him for the failure of the projects like Shazam 2 and The Flash and Blue Beetle, but at the end of the day, he is co-CEO, so he should be doing a bit more to really like push these products. Shazam 2 was a flop. And look, Shazam 2 I think is okay. Like, it's not great. It's a very mediocre film. It's not the type of film that you need to run out and go see at the cinema, but I liked it when I saw it. Easily the biggest problem with that film though is Zachary Levi. Zachary Levi is a really bad Shazam. It seems like he doesn't talk to Asher Angel half the time. It just seems like he just improvs and does whatever he needs to do. And then Asher Angel just shows up on set and beats the more stoic and mature Billy. I just find it weird how Billy Batson, the young Billy Batson, is more mature than Shazam. The Flash, which James Gunn, co-CEO of DC Films, claims to love.
The Flash, a fantastic movie that I really love. Fantastic movie I really love.
Is a bad film. Yes, I think it's bad. Fight me on it, watch my review, and see if you agree with me. But despite the fact that this film was heavily marketed as one of the best superhero films ever made according to James Gunn, and was beloved by Tom Cruise and Stephen King, and it was the great swan song of Michael Keaton returning to play Batman once again, it flopped. Because it's an awful film. And Blue Beetle was just really generic to me. In many ways, you can tell that that film was made for streaming. When I was watching it, I was like, yep, this is a film that I would see on Netflix that I'd watch like the first 30 minutes of and probably turn off because it's actually not that good. I really like Joel Duena as Jaime Reyes. I think he's very good. And there are moments in the film that are really nice. Like I like the stuff with his family. That stuff is pretty good. The stuff with his dad is really good. But at the end of the day, it was so mediocre and you could tell a lot of the upper cast like Susan Sarandon, they were just there for a paycheck. There's also just a lot of dumb things in that film, like how Jenny Cord gives Jaime Reyes the scarab in the Big Belly burger box in the middle of the atrium where there's a security camera, and that's obviously recorded them, and then they leave, and they literally pan to the camera, but then apparently it takes the people at Cord Industries so long to find Jaime and find out he's the Blue Beetle. Also, the film does a lot to really reinforce a lot of minority stereotypes, because apparently in films, minorities are just the people that are very loud and they scream all the time, and it's kind of like, that's not really positive representation. Also, a lot of the racial commentary was kind of silly too. The fact that Jaime walks in, clearly dressed for a job interview. The person at the reception looks at him and goes, oh yeah, the cleaning office is that way. That's not how corporations work. In the real world, the receptionist would be like, hi, how are you? How can I help? Who are you here to see? But no, apparently in this world, the receptionist just goes, cleaning office is that way. That's not how that works. Anyways, Blue Beetle talk aside, the issue that I have with James Gunn taking over the DCU is the fact that he seems to be handpicking and choosing what he's keeping and what he's getting rid of. To me, it should just be a total reboot. You can't keep Viola Davis and Margot Robbie and John Cena and pretend like it's a separate universe. I mean, yeah, he can do that because he is the CEO of DC Studios, but also, in many ways, by taking Viola Davis, who is also a key character in the Suicide Squad film from 2016, which is a DCEU film, not a DCU film, you're taking baggage of the old DCEU with you. The conflicting reports of whether or not Gal Gadot is staying as Wonder Woman is just hurting the brand even more, because people love Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman, but ultimately, don't keep Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman. I love her, but to me, she only works in the Zack Snyder-led projects. But then also, apparently they want to keep Jason Momoa because they want to make an Aquaman trilogy, and it's like, why? But also, why are you going to recast Ben Affleck and Henry Cavill when it seems like the Batman of this universe wants to be the same age as Ben Affleck's Batman, but now he has Damian Wayne as Robin? And also, I've made a whole video on the casting of David Corenswet as Superman and Superman Legacy, but the thing that kind of bugs me about David Corenswet's casting is the fact that he looks like Henry Cavill. But then again, Henry Cavill looks like Superman. But then also, if James Gunn's DCU is allowed to spin off and have Elseworld projects, what is stopping James Gunn from keeping Henry Cavill, giving him an Elseworld story where they make Man of Steel 2, call it Man of Tomorrow, make it a standalone Superman film, and let Henry Cavill make his dream perfect Superman film? The thing that just baffles me the most is the fact that James Gunn wants to move forwards with DC. He wants to separate it from the DCEU. But if you keep picking and choosing things that you're going to keep from the old DCEU, then your new franchise isn't going to work because you're still reminding people of the things that used to be. Also, half of the projects that James Gunn has announced for his slate for Phase 1 of the DCU, they are way too niche. Peacemaker was a success, yes, but characters like Swamp Thing and The Authority, they're so niche. Audiences don't care. They made a Swamp Thing show before. It was too expensive and got cancelled. And one of the key reasons why it got cancelled was the fact that people didn't tune into it. The one thing that James Gunn has said that gives me hope and promise for his DCU is the fact that he wants every project to be creator driven. He wants the directors to bring their unique voices and to make their projects feel distinct and unique. That is all I'm asking for. That is the superhero stuff that nowadays anyways seem to be resonating with audiences. Things like Joker and the Batman and Spider-Verse. When you look at the criticisms of the superhero and comic book genre from directors like Martin Scorsese and Quentin Tarantino and Denis Villeneuve, all their criticisms are valid. When Tarantino says that a lot of the superhero stars aren't movie stars, he's not wrong. When Simu Liu went out on Twitter going, I'm a movie star, I'm a movie star. Look, I like Simu Liu. I like him in Kim's Convenience, and I liked him in Shang-Chi, and he's good in Barbie. But at the end of the day, he isn't a movie star. Movie stars are people like Russell Crowe and Denzel Washington and Will Smith and Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger, Tom Cruise, Leonardo DiCaprio. I mean, whilst we do have movie stars that are up and coming, like Zendaya, like Timothée Chalamet, like Tom Holland, like Sydney Sweeney, like, I don't know, movie stars. The actors that you see on screen where you go, oh yeah, I recognize them, they're gonna be big one day. And Simu Liu, to me, he isn't there yet. He's only really been in 3 major things, that being Shang-Chi, Kim's Convenience, and Barbie. 3 major projects to me don't make you a superstar unless you are critically acclaimed for them. There's a difference between Simu Liu and Austin Butler. Austin Butler has had a very small acting career and has had small bit roles in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but his performance as Elvis Presley was well renowned, but also he won a BAFTA and a Golden Globe for it. He's got awards for it. Simu Liu didn't win anything for Shang-Chi because, look, he's good in that film, but he's hardly awards worthy. Timothée Chalamet is Timothée Chalamet. He's got the Oscar for Call Me By Your Name. He's Paul Atreides in Dune. He's Willy Wonka. And even though his career is still young and he still hasn't been in a ton of like incredibly amazing things like say Daniel Day-Lewis, you can tell he has the potential to get there. You can tell he's a phenomenal actor. Simu just isn't there yet. He's a good actor. His career is still young. He can still do the projects that will get him to that sort of clout and fame. Right now, though, he just isn't at that level. Anyways, let's look at Martin Scorsese's comments. Should I do it in the Martin Scorsese voice? I don't actually know if I can do Martin Scorsese. You want to be a filmmaker, the first thing you gotta do is just gonna make you... I'm not gonna do that. That's terrible. I'm just gonna read it. I've tried to watch a few of them, and they're not for me. That they seem to me to be closer to theme parks than they are to movies, as I've known and loved them throughout my life. And that, in the end, I don't think they're cinema. For me, for the filmmakers I came to love and respect, for my friends who started making movies around the same time I did, cinema was about revelation, aesthetic, emotional and spiritual revelation. It's about characters, the complexity of people and their contradictory and sometimes paradoxical natures, and the way they can hurt one another and love one another and suddenly come face to face with themselves. It's a chicken and egg issue. If people are only given one kind of thing and endlessly sold only one kind of thing, of course they're going to want more of that one kind of thing. Now, as Scorsese has said, in many ways he has a different definition to cinema, because when people think of, theme park movies, they will think of things like Avatar and Titanic, and those films by many are considered to be cinema. Something like a Terminator 2, that's considered peak cinema by many movie fans today. Harry Potter as a franchise is considered cinema. Scorsese probably wouldn't consider that cinema because in many ways he has a specific style of cinema that he believes to be cinema. But the thing is, everything he said about aesthetic and emotional and spiritual revelation, he's not wrong, but also that can be applied to the earlier comic book films. Those ideas are in Batman Begins and The Dark Knight, and even The Dark Knight Rises. They're in the first Iron Man, they're in the first Thor. They're in Captain America the Winter Soldier and Civil War. They're in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 1 and 2. Heck, they're even in the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man films. I don't know if they are in, say, the Spider-Man Home trilogy, but I think the word I really latch onto is the word aesthetic. A lot of the current MCU and superhero films, they just lack vision, they lack direction, they lack a good aesthetic. There's a reason why many people were taken aback by how visually stunning the Batman was, and that's because it was visually stunning. If Roger Deakins, renowned cinematographer, revered cinematographer Roger Deakins, is proclaiming the Batman to be the best looking film of the year when it wasn't even nominated for the Oscar, you know it's a good looking film. Name me a Marvel film that is actually visually aesthetically interesting. The closest in recent memory I would say is Doctor Strange 2, and that's because Sam Raimi tries to give it a visual aesthetic and flair. And the thing that I find hilarious is that when you get to the post-credit scenes, all the colourful Sam Raimi-esque colour grading is gone, and they just look like generic Marvel films. Now let's go on to ma compa, mon ami, Denis Villeneuve. Let's see what he has to say about the comic book genre. Hold on, wait, I can do the Denis Villeneuve accent. Let me get into it. Arkanen, Paul Atreides, Villeneuve revealed that Marvel movies, they have turned us into zombies a bit, he claims. He claims that the issue is that we are in front of too many Marvel movies that are nothing more than a cut and paste of others, he added. Just think of the golden age of Hollywood to see that commercial films can make a different artistic proposal and therefore political. I have never felt like a loss of impediment to have a generous budget or to do what I want to do upside down. Villeneuve seems to want to debunk the myth that large budget films cannot be artistically relevant at the same time. The director also recently made another comment about MCU films to premiere. If we are talking about Marvel, the thing is all these films are made from the same mold. Some filmmakers can add color to it, but they are all cast in the same factory. However, he does clarify that it doesn't take anything away from the movies, but they're all formatted. And the thing is, he's correct. Tell me a superhero film that doesn't follow the same tropes. We're introduced to our main character who is very sympathetic but also very sarcastic and witty. We're introduced to a menacing villain at the start of the film, and about around the end of the first act, the hero and the villain meet, they fight, the hero loses to the villain, they spend the whole of the second act sort of reflecting, self-reflecting, training, and by the third act, they come across the villain again, they fight the villain, they beat the villain either dies or is locked up in jail, and then we get two post-credit scenes at the end. One sets up a sequel, and the other one either sets up the larger story of the universe, or it's just a joke. All these films follow the same format, they all feel the same. In the first three phases of the MCU, that trope in itself didn't feel worn out and tired because it was all building up to the endgame of, well, Endgame. But after Endgame, it just seemed like the MCU was just shuffling their feet and they didn't know what direction they were going into. Now we know they're heading towards Avengers, Kang Dynasty and Secret Wars, but are they really going towards that? Are they really trying to tell a story? Because so far, all their multiverse stories don't even link up or make any sense. Do you remember when Kevin Feige kept claiming how there was a 3-part story that was told between WandaVision, Doctor Strange 2, and Spider-Man No Way Home? What story? Doctor Strange isn't even in WandaVision. Wanda shows up in Doctor Strange 2, but in many ways feels like a different character to the character in WandaVision. And then in Doctor Strange 2, whilst there are bits of No Way Home that seem to impact his character, it doesn't really play a massive impact into his story in Doctor Strange 2. Look, the genre just needs to change. They need to go back to telling grounded, compelling character stories. Because when Scorsese talks about the complexity of human nature, we had that in the first Iron Man, we had that in the first Captain America and Thor 1, and in the early Sam Raimi Spider-Man films, the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man films, and to an extent, it's in Spider-Man Homecoming for a bit. But not just that, Denis Villeneuve is also right, these films are formatted. In many ways, all of these superheroes, you can just change their skins, and they in many ways feel like the same character. If you put a Spider-Man skin on Blue Beetle, hell, that's a Spider-Man film. If you put Blue Beetle in Captain Marvel, Hell, it's a Captain Marvel Blue Beetle film. Okay, that didn't make much sense, but you get what I'm trying to say. James Cameron even said that all these characters act like bachelors in college and they all are like frat boys. He's not wrong. They don't act like real people half the time. Why did it take Tony Stark so long to get married towards Pepper Potts? Why is Thor regressed from the noble Asgardian hero that he was at the end of the first Thor into a dumb frat boy in Love and Thunder? But in addition to the changes that need to be made towards the story and characterization of these characters, the genre itself aesthetically needs to change. Remember the days when blockbusters used to look like blockbusters? You could see every penny on screen. Nowadays, a Marvel film will come out, it'll cost $200 million, and you'll ask where the budget went. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. How can the upcoming Doom Part 2 cost $165 million and look better than every MCU film that cost $200 million plus? I personally feel like these films need to change, and judging by the box office results this year, it seems like the audiences want these films to change too. Going to the cinema in many ways is expensive, especially when you're trying to bring a group of people or a family along. It becomes a hassle. And if audiences go to see a superhero film that feels like a superhero film they saw either a month or two ago, then they aren't going to show up again because they'll just wait for it to show up on streaming or they'll buy it on digital. Look, I love this genre, I want it to do well, but I won't live in blind ignorance and praise everything that comes out when, at the end of the day, they are subpar or not good. I have dreams of making superhero films. I'd love to make a Spider-Man film, a Batman film, a Superman film. I want to make stuff in this genre as a filmmaker, but if the movies that are coming out are the films that I'm expected to make, I don't want to make them. If I have to follow the same format and follow the same visual aesthetic of these films, I don't want to make them. I don't dream to make films like that. The films I want to make, I want them to be visually distinct and I want them to leave an impact on my audience. I don't just want to tell the same story over and over again. And the thing is, things like the hero's journey, those sort of story tropes and story structures, they have been told over and over again, but also it's the way you tell them. You can tell a familiar sounding story, you just have to make it feel a bit different, but also tell it well. Bring in emotion, bring in heart, bring in a different flavor and aesthetic, and you will enamor and entrance audiences. But those are just my thoughts on the superhero genre and why I think it needs to change. What do you guys think? Do you guys think the superhero genre is fine, even though that you can see from the box office numbers, the genre is declining? But also, what do you think needs to change about these films? Let me know in the comments down below. Like, subscribe, follow me on social media, all that good stuff. Until we meet again, I'll see you guys next time.